Thank you, sirs, for joining us. All over the world, we see that sector regulators are a very, very important office, because ultimately they are the ones who deal with day-to-day economic governance, much more than a ministry or a politician does. All over the world, regulators are experts. In India, we have only the IAS, retired IAS officers, who become regulators. TRAI, Competition Commission of India, IRDA, even RBI. I mean, we've gone 2 steps forward by making the RBI governor also a retired IAS officer. Why has this happened?
Please try and understand, India is very, very new to regulation. Okay? If you created TRI in 1997 and you gave it certain powers, 3 years later, because you don't like the chairman, you changed the rules of the game and altered the legislation. And this is a matter of fact. It's not a matter of my opinion. And it was not an IAS officer who was the chairman at that time. It was just that the person was very inconvenient to the incumbent government. Second, in many other places, you have created regulatory institutions which have barely started functioning. Third, where these institutions have started functioning, it is not the full-fledged regulatory institution you see in the West. If you think the FCC and the TRI are the same, dream on. Licensing is not with me. Licensing is with the government. How many people do you think are willing to come and work as a regulator, be answerable to Parliament,
Yes.
answer the public, and ask me? I have taken heat from various sources in this room. So don't tell me about heat. And to do it for a salary which is a pittance.
No, that could
Please,
be.
No, Raghav, the point is this. If the government is going to set that as the wage,
Fair enough.
you are not going to get very many applicants from the private sector.
Fair enough. I think that is one component answer.
Please take
you underpaid regulators.
And the only person you are going to get at that wage from the private sector who wants to do the job will not do the job you want. He will do something
Fair
quite
enough. I take that as a substantial answer. Mr. Chawla.
I think Rahul has brought out all the aspects. The point is not where the regulators come from. The point is whether they are able to deliver. It's not as if it's limited only to civil servants.
I want to move to the most substantial point which is embedded in this. Does it reflect a deep suspicion of market forces which is embedded in the government? Does it reflect that you would rather have a person who's been 35 years in the government, illustrious career, who knows the way government works, rather than knows the way markets work?
I don't think that's true. See, what is happening is all these regulatory bodies are not more than, say, about 10 years old at the most. Some of them even younger. They are in the process of evolving their culture. The shift from the state or the sovereign as a regulator to the regulator as a regulator is gradually taking place. So it's not the fear or the suspicion of somebody coming from outside. It could be, it's possible that there is a feeling that let these bodies grow, let there be people who have handled the system or handled issues from the side of the sovereign. These bodies will grow, people will come, maybe they'll get better paid, and there will be an interest in becoming regulators. It's not going to come in one day or 1 year.
So I turn to you, sirs, on the substantial point of the suspicion of market. I mean, this is something that, let me give you an example. We have had this FDI in retail. It's just been opened up. With a lot of fanfare, the government went and said, we really want to do it, we think it will have a great impact. Once you've done that, there is now so much micromanaging happening that you will sell only this much percentage to this person, you will only set up greenfield, you will not buy. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm saying this betrays a suspicion of market, that the markets will not be efficient, therefore I have to micromanage.
I think 2 or 3 things. One, you need regulators precisely in the areas where you don't believe that leaving it to markets is good enough. I mean, we don't have a regulator determining the price of cars. We believe that's okay, leave it to the market, right? You want
he determines the price of television, sir.
No.
So therefore we are not.
No. If he's determining the price of individual television sets,
not sets, channels.
That's a different issue, because that's a natural, that's a monopoly which you're handing out. You need some regulation there. No, see, the thing is,
no, this deeply suspicion of market is a very important point.
The moment you have a regulatory role, it's not the same thing as having free markets. That's the area where some regulation is necessary.
And you have the best regulator in the world for that. His job is to see that markets are competitive.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that we're transiting in an environment where the only people who've actually had a lot of experience of government, how governments think, how parliament thinks, are those who worked in government. So therefore, this is a transition.
Are you in favor of this micromanaging of FDI and retail that we are seeing? That you will sell only this much here, sell that much there?
Let me make one point. The world over, there is a certain change, which has been brought about by the 2008 crisis. Many people think what is called the efficiency market hypothesis has been exploded. When you talk about the suspicion of the market, I must say, this suspicion of the market is not something peculiar to India. It is something happening everywhere, in the sense that markets have also failed, and failed in a very significant way.
Sir, it has been a failure of the regulation of markets, not so much the markets. We can go into the banking failure in the US and Europe, but it was a regulatory failure.
The efficiency market hypothesis essentially says that the markets can efficiently allocate and markets will do.
Well-regulated markets can. As I said, the Competition Commission is there to ensure that there is a well-regulated.
Look, the efficiency hypothesis relates to the functioning of financial markets. And for long it's been known that financial markets are characterized by what is called asymmetry of information, which is not the case when you're buying mangoes or melons or whatever. So I don't think around the world, the real feeling is that there used to be a perception that it's best to even deregulate financial markets. And indeed, that's what led.
That has come to grief.
I think carrying it too far, I'm not talking of retail, but carrying anything too far has its own problems. And therefore, we have to work out a compromise between regulation and innovation.
Absolutely.
I can see regulation being carried on up to the point at which it will defeat the emergence of innovation.
Absolutely.
And therefore, striking a balance between innovation and regulation is really the task of the regulators.
So I come to the Competition Commission, sir. There is a commission which is mandated to ensure that markets are competitive. Once we have that, and the body is working fine, sir. We have seen several judgments and decisions that they have given. Then to have a super norm on top that you will buy this much from that, this much from here, you will not, as I said, you will not buy out a small entity, you will have to set up capacity right next to it. Are we carrying it too far? And is that the reason you haven't seen anyone come in? No one's come in. People have come, talked, and have gone. So when you have a well-functioning Competition Commission, why do we end up micromanaging? Is it therefore a betrayal of our suspicion of markets? Does the government of India suspect markets?
I don't know. See, this is basically a public policy issue. As the Deputy Chairman was explaining, government feels that they need to bring about this change in a calibrated manner. I suppose they'll wait and watch how it works. It's always open to change. That's possible. It may happen in the near future. It's not really, not at this stage, an issue which is bothering us or which is agitating us in the Competition Commission.
Okay, I want to talk about another thing, sir, about when in this whole business of, and I'm sticking to regulators because I, as a practicing business person, know how important regulators are. They can make or break the prospects of a business, as we are seeing in the case of FDI and retail, as we have seen in the case of several businesses. The amount of expertise and literacy about a sector that is needed that somehow gets lost. And let me again give you an example, and therefore I would like you to respond to that example. About 5 years ago, there was this whole question of put and call options in India. It's a technical subject, financial people know it, corporate legal people know it. Suddenly the government of India one fine day said that if you have a put and call option, this is not equity, this is actually debt. And then banned it. And then banned it. And then for 3 years, when investments started dropping off because the world knew put and call options as a very standard instrument, the government realized that maybe we've done something wrong. And then it was reinstated. So my question is, if the government had people with expertise, this question of put and call options, whether they have debt features or equity features, could have been sorted out in 60 minutes in a room. And it took 4 years of a ban and a revocation of a ban, and we suffered. So I come back to that question of why is the government suspicious of market forces, suspicious of expertise, which is outside the government?
Regulation is about public policy, about trade-offs. My charter, for instance, says I'm responsible for protecting consumers. I'm also responsible for orderly development of the industry. They're conflicting objectives constantly. And that is why perhaps a plausible explanation for somebody who spent 30 years in public service to come and do something about public policy, because that's all he's done for 35 years. Please ask me any question you wish to on what the institution has done over the last one and a quarter years I've been on my watch, and I will happily answer.
Oh, fair enough. So let me put the put-call question to you, sir. You've been in government for so long. Now, it was astonishing for the world outside that India, a mature economy, suddenly says that put and call options are banned. It's a very standard financial instrument. And it may look like a small issue to you, but in the world outside, it stuns people. Just as the Vodafone tax case stunned people, just as the Shell tax case stuns people. It may be very small for you, sir. For the world outside, it's what is India up to?
No, look, I'll put it this way. When you're moving from a position that's restrained or restricted and regulated to a position that is actually more liberal, there's always uncertainty about who's taking advantage of it. I mean, that's sort of regulatory arbitrage, right? Now, one approach is that you're very clear that you're going down this road, and basically the ones who are faster and quicker off the mark will take advantage of it. And in those cases, the best thing to do is to put in to move faster rather than slower. But what happens is that when you do something is liberalized, something else is being restrained, somebody finds a way of doing regulatory arbitrage, immediately people say, hey, can we stop it? Now, the truth of the matter is that if you can't stop it, or if the only way you can stop it is by creating a huge amount of damage, you shouldn't do that. But in any evolution, there are going to be situations where the judgment call will go one way or the other way. And I think you need to take an overall look at it. I don't believe, by the way, that the put and call option, I mean, there are so many things there. I mean, for example, the entire creation of the non-deliverable forwards market abroad. I mean, we don't have capital account convertibility. You cannot hedge that easily, but you can do all this in Singapore. This has been known for the last several years, and I'm sure that in due course, under, let's say, more normal situations, I think year by year we have to rationalize what we do. But remember, in the matter of capital account convertibility, we are deliberately, and I think rightly, going gradually. So if you go gradually, there will always be some operation where somebody will be putting a restriction, somebody else will try to get around it, and there are any number of examples of this. I mean, the P notes, for example, was one, and you live and learn. I mean, I don't think everybody else outside understands it, and this has happened in other countries too. I mean, for example, in Brazil and Chile and so on, where at one point...
They're not the best examples, sir.
No, but...
They're not the best examples.
No, wait a minute. For restraining capital flows they were, it turned out they said, you can't allow short-term debt because we don't want debt. So people did put and call options on equity, and they've realized that it's exactly the same thing.
We must be about the only country in the world, sir, which prefers FII over FDI. We give them full tax breaks. They are fully convertible. FII money is convertible, 100% convertible in the capital account. It can come in today, go out tomorrow. In FDI, we create all kinds of problems. When it should be the other way around, we should be actually welcoming FDI and putting a few more curbs on FII. Once again, I come back to, is it a product of the lack of full financial and corporate expertise within the government?
No, I think, let me just say, first, it's not true, by the way, that we prefer FII to FDI.
But you give them much more.
Wait a second.
But you give them much more.
Wait a second. By the nature of FII, since they don't have any management control, the worry about FDI, you may say that worry is irrational, but if you took a public vote on it, they wouldn't support you. The worry about FDI is that in certain areas, somehow you don't want foreigners to control. So if you're going to put some restrictions, if you look at the Indian situation, the part of the economy which is subject to FDI restriction is very, very small. It's just that that's the only part people complain about because everybody else is happy to move in and out. The notion that FII is bad is also wrong. And it's true that it can move in and out.
Absolutely.
But it's doing a lot of good to the economy, creating liquidity in the stock market. And the honest truth is, it's not the same as short-term debt. If there is a conventional wisdom on capital flows, it is that short-term foreign exchange denominated debt is bad. And that is what we do control. Of course, there must be people getting around that control also.
If you look at FDI, look at the totality of it, and I will say that a very large segment of the economy, the manufacturing sector, is really under a liberalized system. It is only in some sections we have put the restrictions.
No.
And on the FII, there is also another interesting thing. After all, the difference between FII and FDI is made in terms of the percentage that they do. In fact, in the recent period, it has also been seen that 20 to 25% of the FII investment has also been in the primary market, in the new issues. Therefore, it almost takes the character of FDI.
No, I'm saying welcome FII. I'm saying the impediments put on FDI was
but I think
which
you
of
need
course
to look
now
at the totality of it and see how much of the manufacturing sector has been affected. Automobile is free. Look at, there are many areas in which it is almost 100%.
Right. So I would come to you, and you've been the finance secretary, and this whole FDI, FII issue was something that you must have dealt with it as well. So would you like to add to this debate on whether we have been unusually restrictive in FDI as compared to the kind of benefits that FII investors get when it should really be a more balanced?
Raghav, what I would say is that the FDI policy has consistently over the years evolved. It's been a dynamic one. If you look back what the policy was in the 60s and 70s to what it is today, it's been a huge amount of change. I think more change is required. It will be welcome. It seems to be, from what I see from the papers, and I'm not now part of the governance paradigm in the government, but from what I see, it's those changes around the corner. I think those would do good to the country.
And sir, I'll have the last word with you on FDI policy, because you've run that as well. In your previous job, you were really in charge of that. This whole liberalization that we are talking about now, and the newspaper reports on the Arvind Mayaram committee, we are doing it in a sense of crisis. We are doing it because we believe now we need to cover our current account deficit willy-nilly. Would it not have been better to have done it more proactively? And I know that the DIPP has often pushed for it and not got its way in the government. Do you in a sense regret it, that it's now being done under a sense of crisis rather than having been done as a proactive policy?
I think you need to be very careful in thinking this through. Don't think that there's a horde of foreign investors waiting at the door to run in the moment you raise the FDI caps. Please, if that's the perspective you have, dream on. That's not reality. And that is where I think a little more thinking needs to go in. Let me give you an example. Today, for instance, in telecom, you have 74. So the question is, should we raise it to 100? Bully for you, if you think do it for 100, do it for 100. The point I wish to make is very simple. If you want to fix the problems of the industry, the FDI cap has nothing to do with it. That I can guarantee to you. There are so many other problems in that sector that if you were to ask me, I would draw up a completely different priority list of what needs to get fixed, because that will revive the sector, that will contribute to the economy. And therefore, merely believing that raising FDI to 100% in telecom will usher in a golden era, that's all.
Let me make one comment.
Yes, and we can end with that.
On the
Yes.
general proposition
Yes.
of whether it should be done under the shadow of crisis. But it so happens that under the shadow of crisis, things always get done faster. The whole liberalization program in this country came under the shadow of the 1991 crisis.
And
therefore, I think there is nothing wrong or nothing unusual about things getting done under the shadow of a crisis.
No, and I think that is such an honest and a wonderful thing to end on, because some people feel that that is also India's big weakness, that we haven't adopted economic reforms out of conviction. We've always done it when our backs are to the wall.
I think the crisis...
1991 was a crisis, 1998 was a crisis, 2007-8 was a crisis, 2013 is a crisis.
Crisis gave the conviction.
That is truly a wonderful phrase to end on, sir. Thank you very much for being with us. And thank you very much for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you.